Altai, nomads of the frozen mountains. The Altai Mountains rise where four nations meet: Russia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and China. A knot of peaks and valleys that has served as a crossroads, battleground, and refuge for thousands of years. This is not the highest mountain range in the world, nor the longest, but it may be the most consequential. From these mountains came the Turkic peoples, the Mongol hordes, waves of migration and conquest that shaped Eurasia. The Altai was always more than geography. It was an origin point, a place where cultures were born before spreading across continents. The name itself means golden mountains in Turkic languages, though no one is certain what the gold refers to. The autumn colors, mineral deposits, or something more metaphorical. The range stretches roughly 2,000 kilometers through Central Asia, with elevations reaching over 4,500 meters. Glaciers cling to the highest peaks, feeding rivers that flow into deserts and steppes, bringing life to regions that would otherwise be uninhabitable. This is a nomad country. Not the romantic version from stories, but the real thing. People who move with seasons and animals, who live in felt tents heated by dried dung, who measure wealth in livestock and distance in days of travel. The Altai Kazakh, the Altai people themselves, the Tuvans, the Mongols, different groups, different languages, but united by a way of life that predates nations, borders, and the modern world's insistence on settlement and permanence. The mountains here are not particularly cold by Siberian standards. Winter temperatures average -20 to -30 degrees Celsius. Harsh but survivable with proper preparation. What makes the Altai extreme is remoteness, the sheer difficulty of accessing valleys that may be days from the nearest road. This is also contested territory. Russia controls the north, Kazakhstan the west, Mongolia the south, China the east. This is the Altai, golden mountains, ancient crossroads, homeland of peoples who refuse to stay in one place. Gorno-Altaisk, the capital between worlds. Gorno-Altaisk, capital of Russia's Altai Republic, sits in a valley at 280 meters elevation, surrounded by mountains that rise to 4,000 meters. Population 65,000. It's the only real city in a region the size of Portugal. This is where nomadic culture meets Russian administration, where indigenous Altai people navigate bureaucracy designed by and for settled peoples, where traditional life and modern demands collide daily. The city was founded in 1830 as a Russian Orthodox mission, part of the empire's effort to convert and control indigenous populations. It worked, partially. Many Altai converted, at least nominally. Though traditional beliefs persisted beneath Christian veneers, shamanism, reverence for sacred mountains, rituals tied to livestock and seasons, these never fully disappeared, just became hidden or syncretic, blending Christian saints with older spirits. The architecture is Soviet, concrete apartment blocks, wide streets, a central square dominated by a statue that's been replaced twice as political winds shifted. There's little here that's distinctly Altai, except the people themselves and the National Museum, which houses artifacts from Pazyryk burials. Frozen tombs from the 5th century BCE that preserved textiles, tattoos, and mummified remains showing remarkable continuity with later nomadic cultures. The city serves as gateway to the mountains. Tourists come here before heading into backcountry. Outfitters operate from here. Government agencies coordinate from here. But it's also where Altai people come when they can no longer sustain nomadic life. When they need medical care. When their children require education beyond what's available in remote valleys. It's a place of transition, of leaving one world for another, often permanently. Winter temperatures drop to -25 degrees Celsius. Spring comes late, autumn is brief. The city exists in the mountain's shadow, literally and figuratively. The peaks are always visible, always present, a reminder of what's beyond the pavement and power lines. Some residents maintain connections to nomadic relatives, visiting in summer, helping with migrations. Others have severed those ties entirely, becoming urban Russians who happen to be ethnically Altai, language and culture reduced to festivals and museums. The Altai language is endangered. Russian dominates education, media, government, commerce. Children learn Altai in school as a subject, not as their primary language. The result is predictable. Each generation speaks less fluently than the last. Vocabulary shrinks. Eventually, only the elderly remember idioms and songs that expressed concepts Russian can't capture. Gorno-Altaisk is a practical necessity, the compromise between maintaining ethnic identity and accessing modern services. But it's also evidence of nomadism's slow death. Once people settle, they rarely return to the mountains. The city is comfortable, easier, full of opportunities that don't exist in yurts. The trade-off seems obvious until you realize what's being traded. Not just a way of life, but a relationship to land, animals, and seasons that shaped human culture for most of history. The city endures, grows slowly, absorbs more people from the mountains each year. The mountains remain, indifferent to who lives in them or who leaves. Gorno-Altaisk stands between neither fully traditional nor fully modern. The Yukok Plateau. The quiet lands at the extreme south of the Altai, where Russia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and China nearly meet. The Yukok Plateau rises to 2,500 meters, a high grassland plateau known in Altai as Uchmer, the Quiet Lands, or Lands of the End. This is sacred territory, revered for millennia, still largely empty of permanent human presence. Winter here is brutal, -35 degrees Celsius. winds that reach 140 kilometers per hour, snow that buries everything for 8 months. The plateau is famous for the Pazyryk burials, ancient tombs where permafrost preserved bodies, textiles, and artifacts in extraordinary detail. The most famous is the Ice Maiden, discovered in 1993. A woman buried 2,500 years ago with elaborate tattoos, silk clothing, and horses sacrificed for her journey to the afterlife. Her removal from the plateau caused controversy. Many Altai people believe disturbing these graves brings misfortune. And indeed, shortly after her excavation, the region experienced earthquakes and floods that locals attributed to ancestral anger. The Ice Maiden now rests in a museum in Novosibirsk, though there have been calls for her return. The Altai people view the Ukok as dwelling place of spirits, a landscape too powerful for casual presence. Few live here permanently. Some nomadic herders bring livestock in summer. Border guards patrol, scientists study, but mostly it's empty. Wind-scoured, a place that feels less like land and more like threshold between worlds. The permafrost that preserved ancient tombs is thawing. Archaeological sites that remained frozen for millennia are now degrading. Evidence disappearing before it can be studied. Climate change is erasing history here, literally melting it into mud. The scientists scramble to document what's emerging before it's lost, knowing they're in a race they'll eventually lose. The plateau is designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, protected on paper, vulnerable in practice. Illegal mining occurs in remote valleys, gold mostly, extracted by operations that leave scars visible from space. The borders here are porous, enforcement minimal, the economic incentive for extraction overwhelming local or international regulations. The quiet lands are being hollowed out, wealth removed, damage permanent. For the nomadic peoples who still use the Ukok seasonally, the changes are visceral. Pastures that supported livestock for centuries are degrading, vegetation patterns shifting, weather becoming unpredictable, the knowledge accumulated over generations. Where to move when, which valleys provide the best grazing, how to predict storms, becomes less reliable each year. The land is changing faster than culture can adapt. The Ukok teaches humility. It's too high, too cold, too remote for comfortable human habitation. It tolerates presence, but doesn't encourage it. The people who come here do so with respect, aware they're guests in a landscape that belongs primarily to wind, stone, and spirits. That relationship, humans as temporary visitors rather than permanent owners, is what the Altai culture understood and what modernity struggles to accept. The quiet lands remain quiet mostly. The burial sites hold their remaining secrets. The permafrost thaws. The borders remain contested. And the plateau itself, ancient, beautiful, indifferent, continues its existence, outlasting the peoples and nations that claim it. Waiting for the day when human presence becomes once again seasonal and fleeting. Koshagach, the coldest town. At 1,750 meters elevation in the Altai Republic's southeastern corner, Koshagach is one of the coldest inhabited places in Russia outside of Siberia. Winter temperatures drop to minus 45 degrees Celsius, and the town holds the record for coldest temperature in the Altai, minus 62 degrees Celsius, measured in 1969. Population 7,000, mostly ethnic Kazakhs and Altai people, it exists as a service center for the surrounding steppe. Harsh, dry, windy terrain, where nomadic herding is the only viable livelihood. The town's name means farewell to the trees in Altai, and is accurate. This is where the forest ends and the high-altitude steppe begins. The landscape is severe, rolling grasslands, distant mountains, sky that dominates everything. In winter, the wind is relentless, scouring snow from the ground, creating drifts that bury roads and buildings. In summer, dust storms reduce visibility to meters, the dry earth lifted and hurled by winds that never entirely cease. Koshagach serves as winter base for many nomadic families who live in yurts in the surrounding mountains and steppe during warmer months. When temperatures drop too far, when snow becomes too deep, they come to town. Children enrolled in school, families crowded into small apartments or staying with relatives, waiting for spring when they can return to their herds. It's a compromise between nomadic tradition and modern necessity. A pattern repeated across the Altai, wherever indigenous peoples try to maintain traditional lives while accessing services that require settlement. The town has a haunted quality, half occupied even when technically full. Buildings standing empty or barely used, streets that feel abandoned even in daylight. It's a place people come to when they must, not where they want to be. The surrounding steppe is home. Koshagach is just shelter from the worst of winter. A temporary concession to cold that even the most hardened nomads can't entirely endure intense. The road through Koshagach connects Russia to Mongolia, the Chuisky Tract, one of the most scenic and dangerous highways in Central Asia. It's paved now, maintained somewhat, but still subject to landslides, winter closures, sections where one side is cliff face and the other is drop into nothing. Truck drivers use it to carry goods between countries. Tourists drive it for adventure. Locals use it because there's no alternative. The road is lifeline and hazard simultaneously, the only reliable connection to the outside world. Climate change is visible here in unexpected ways. Warmer winters sound beneficial, but they're not. Unpredictable freeze-thaw cycles create ice layers that livestock can't break through to reach grass beneath. The traditional knowledge of where to move animals, when to migrate to lower elevations, becomes unreliable. Herders lose animals, not from cold, but from starvation, because the seasonal patterns their ancestors learned no longer hold. The younger generation is leaving. The town's schools are half empty, teachers serve short contracts before requesting transfer to warmer, easier postings. There's little economic opportunity. Herding provides subsistence, but not prosperity. And the skills required don't translate to employment elsewhere. The children who leave for university in Gorno-Altaysk or Novosibirsk rarely return. They're not abandoning their culture. They're making rational choices about how to live in the 21st century. Koshagach will likely persist. It's strategically located, serves a function, and governments need presence in border regions. But it may become increasingly disconnected from the nomadic culture it was meant to support. A town for administrators, border guards, and seasonal workers, rather than a cultural center for peoples whose identity is tied to movement. The farewell to the trees may become farewell to much more. Belua Mountain, the sacred peak. Belua rises to 4,506 meters. The highest peak in the Altai and in Siberia. A massive pyramid of rock and ice visible from hundreds of kilometers away. The mountain's name means white in Russian, describing the perpetual snow and ice that cover its summit. For the indigenous Altai people, it's Uchsuma, the three-headed peak. And it's the most sacred mountain in their cosmology, dwelling place of spirits, axis mundi, connecting earth to sky. The mountain is forbidding. Glaciers descend from the summit in all directions. Ice falls and crevasses making ascent technical and dangerous. Weather changes without warning. Clear mornings become whiteouts by afternoon. Temperatures plummet. Wind makes advance impossible. Climbers die here regularly, mostly from falls or exposure. Sometimes from avalanches that sweep entire routes clean. The mountain does not welcome visitors, though it tolerates their presence when they show proper respect. Traditional Altai belief holds that Beluha should not be climbed. It's sacred, inviolate. Not a challenge to be conquered, but a spiritual presence to be revered from distance. Soviet mountaineers ignored this, made first ascent in 1914, turned the mountain into another peak to be checked off lists. Modern climbers come from around the world, most of them ignorant of or indifferent to local beliefs, focused on summit rather than significance. The tension between Western mountaineering culture and indigenous spiritual practice is ongoing and unresolved. Climbers see a beautiful, challenging peak. Altai people see desecration. Outsiders trampling sacred ground for ego and photos. The mountain itself seems indifferent. It kills climbers and shamans equally, grants summit success, and denies it without pattern. Operates by rules that humans project onto it, but that it never confirms. At the mountain's base, the Akkem Valley serves as approach and staging area. It's beautiful. Alpine meadows, glacial streams, wildflowers in brief summer bloom, but also harsh. Frost can occur any night of the year. Storms develop suddenly. The isolation is complete. A few research stations operate here seasonally. Mountain Rescue maintains a base. Climbers camp while acclimatizing. No one lives here permanently. The altitude and cold make year-round habitation impossible without resources. No one is willing to invest. Climate change is visible in Beluga's glaciers. They're retreating, thinning, exposing rock that's been ice-covered for millennia. The climbing routes are changing as ice features disappear, making ascent more dangerous. The meltwater feeds rivers that millions depend on downstream. As glaciers shrink, those rivers' flow becomes more seasonal, less reliable. The mountain isn't just a spiritual symbol, it's a water tower, and its ice is both sacred and practical, diminishing in ways that will affect far more than mountaineers and shamans. For the Altai people, Beluga's changing glaciers are one more sign that the world is out of balance, that spirits are displeased, that the disrespect shown to sacred places has consequences. For scientists, it's measurable climate change, carbon in atmosphere warming the planet, ice responding to physical laws. Both explanations are true. Both are insufficient. The mountain contains multitudes, geology, mythology, history, future uncertainty, and it refuses to be reduced to single meaning. Beluga endures as mountains do, operating on timescales that make human presence momentary. The ice will melt or not, climbers will come or not. The Altai people will continue to revere it, or their culture will fade, and the mountain will become just another peak, beautiful and indifferent. The sacred exists whether anyone believes in it or not. The mountain confirms nothing, denies nothing, simply is. Hemu village at the edge of the forest. Hemu village lies far from administrative centers. Tucked deep in the Altai mountains near the borderlands where China, Mongolia, and Russia nearly converge. It rests along the Hemu River at roughly 1,100 meters elevation. Surrounded by dense birch, larch, and pine forests that feel ancient and uninterrupted. Morning fog often settles low along the river, blurring the line between water, forest, and sky. The settlement is small, log houses with steep roofs, narrow dirt paths worn smooth by decades of foot traffic, fences built from rough timber, but culturally dense, inhabited primarily by the Tuva people. Whose presence here long predates modern borders. The Tuva of Hemu have traditionally lived as pastoralists and forest dwellers. herding cattle and horses, hunting, fishing, and gathering in rhythms dictated by terrain, weather, and seasonal movement, rather than clocks or calendars. Shamanism is not preserved as folklore or performance. It remains functional and embedded in daily life. Spirit poles stand near homes. Blue ceremonial ribbons flutter from tree branches. And certain mountains, groves, and river bends are approached with caution and silence. The land is not an abstract resource. It is something listened to, negotiated with, and occasionally endured. Winter defines the village's limits and reveals its fragility. Temperatures fall below -30 degrees Celsius. Snow accumulates until rooftops seem to sink into the landscape. And access to the outside world narrows to a few rough routes that can close without warning. Daily life contracts inward. Families rely on stored food, livestock shelter, and tightly shared labor. Knowledge of weather shifts, animal behavior, and forest signs becomes critical. Survival depends less on technology than on memory. What worked before, what failed, what must never be forgotten. Summer reverses the village's isolation. Meadows open. Rivers swell with meltwater. Animals graze freely. And daylight stretches late into the evening. With the thaw comes tourism, photographers, hikers, and visitors drawn by the promise of an untouched mountain village. Wooden guest houses now line the riverbank. Horses are rented for short rides. Traditional clothing appears more frequently, sometimes worn for visitors rather than for weather or work. The income helps sustain the village, but it subtly reshapes it as well. Younger residents increasingly learn Mandarin alongside their native language and leave for education, employment, or modern conveniences unavailable here. Some return seasonally, others do not. Those who stay carry a growing burden. Maintaining homes, rituals, and livestock while the population thins. What visitors experience as timelessness is, in reality, a carefully maintained balance between living tradition and cultural display, continuity and quiet erosion. Hemu endures, but not unchanged. Smoke still rises from chimneys at dawn. Herds still move across familiar slopes. Rituals still mark births, deaths, and seasonal transitions. Yet each year, the pull of roads, markets, and distant cities grows stronger. At the edge of the forest, Hemu remains a rare place where land, belief, and survival are still tightly bound. Holding steady for now, even as the world presses closer. Kazakhstan, the land that remembers. Kazakhstan lies along the Chuya River corridor in the southeastern Altai Republic, far from forests and permanent settlements. Where the mountains open into a broad, exposed basin of stone and wind. The name means Red Valley, and it is precise. Hills rise in long, layered bands of crimson, rust, ochre, pale grey, and chalky white. Their surfaces stripped bare by centuries of frost, wind, and seasonal runoff. From a distance, the land appears folded, as if immense pressure once bent the earth into sheets and then peeled them back, leaving the structure visible. These formations are ancient, far older than the mountains that surround them. The rock layers were deposited hundreds of millions of years ago, when this region lay beneath shallow seas and sediment slowly accumulated. Later, tectonic forces compressed and lifted those layers as continents collided. What erosion has done since is not destruction, but exposure. Parallel ridges, stepped slopes, and shallow valleys run in long, repeating lines, revealing the logic of the land with almost mathematical clarity. Nothing grows here in excess. Vegetation is sparse. Low grasses, small hardy plants clinging to cracks in the stone. There are no forests to interrupt the view, no tall features to dominate the horizon. Wind moves freely across the ridges, shaping sound and temperature alike. In summer, the ground holds heat and reflects light until the air shimmers. In winter, cold settles deeply into the rock, turning the valley into a silent, colorless expanse. Despite its emptiness, Kazakhstan is not neutral space. For the Altai people, it belongs to a sacred geography shaped by tradition rather than borders. Certain ridges are avoided, others approached cautiously. The openness is not inviting, it is instructive. There is no shelter here, no concealment. The land demands awareness and restraint simply by existing as it does. In recent years, the area has gained attention under the name Altai Mars, a label given by outsiders drawn to its otherworldly appearance. Visitors come for photographs, for scale, for novelty. They climb the ridges, trace the colored bands with their hands, move quickly through a place that resists human rhythm. The land absorbs this without reaction. Stone does not respond to curiosity. What Kazakhstan offers is not spectacle, but perspective. Each visible layer marks a different era of the planet, compressed into color and line. Standing here, time becomes tangible. Human presence feels brief, almost incidental. The ridges do not frame a view, they repeat endlessly. flattening the idea of progress or destination. Kizilchin does not comfort, explain, or invite return. It exists as evidence of pressure, movement, erosion, and endurance. In the Altai, where forests shelter life and rivers guide movement, this place remains stripped to structure, a quiet reminder that beneath culture, memory, and belief, the land carries a history that continues without regard for those who pass through it. The valley's silence is absolute, broken only by the occasional gust of wind carrying dust or small stones tumbling down a slope. Even the air feels dense with time, as if it remembers every layer that formed this strange, ordered chaos. To linger here is to feel the planet's persistence, its indifferent patience, its refusal to yield meaning or sentiment to the transient presence of humans. And yet, there is a subtle rhythm to Kizilchin, one that unfolds slowly to those willing to watch. Shadows crawl along the ridges, light refracts across layered surfaces, and the colors shift from pale grey to vivid red as the sun arcs across the sky. Life moves quietly in hidden corners. Tiny plants, insects, perhaps a fox or mountain goat. But the land itself remains the central actor, vast, patient, and unhurried. A testament to endurance far beyond human comprehension. Kudai and the nomadic life. In the remote valleys south of Beluga, a few dozen families still practice full nomadism. Moving seasonally with livestock, living in yurts, maintaining a way of life largely unchanged for centuries. Kudai is not a town but a general region, a gathering place named more than geographic designation, where nomadic Kazakhs and Altai people congregate during certain seasons, before dispersing again to their summer or winter pastures. These are the last true nomads of the Altai, not settled people who keep livestock, but people for whom movement is life's fundamental pattern. Spring in the low valleys where snow melts first and grass emerges. Summer in high meadows where heat is bearable and mosquitoes fewer. Autumn back to middle elevations where wind is less severe. Winter in protected valleys where animals can survive the cold. The cycle repeats, has repeated for generations, will repeat as long as anyone remains to continue it. The yurts, called gurs by Mongolian influence groups, are architectural marvels of efficiency. Felt walls over a collapsible wooden frame. Transportable by horse or camel, assembled in an hour, warm enough for -30 degrees Celsius if you keep the central stove fed with dried dung. No nails, no permanent materials, no attachment to place. A yurt is home because the people inside make it home, not because of location or structure. Daily life is work: herding, milking, making dairy products, butchering, processing wool and hides, maintaining equipment, tracking animals, protecting them from predators. There's no leisure in the Western sense, but also no boss. No schedule imposed from outside, no disconnect between labor and its immediate purpose. You milk the animals because you need dairy. You move camp because pasture is depleted. The logic is direct, unmediated by markets or employers. The children grow up horseback, learning to ride before they walk steadily, becoming competent herders by age 10. Education is informal. Stories, songs, practical demonstrations of how to do everything necessary for survival. Reading and writing are less important than recognizing plants, understanding weather, managing livestock. This creates problem when governments require children to attend school, which means settling for at least part of the year, which means disrupting the nomadic pattern, which begins the erosion of culture. Marriage often happens between nomadic families. Maintaining networks that span hundreds of kilometers. A daughter marries into a family 3 valleys away. The families maintain connection through visits, shared labor during major migrations, helping each other when disaster strikes. These networks are social insurance, economic cooperation, cultural continuity. They depend on mobility. If families settle, the networks dissolve, and with them, a social structure that sustained communities for millennia. The herds are mixed, sheep primarily, but also goats, horses, sometimes yaks or cattle, depending on altitude and grazing conditions. Each animal serves multiple purposes: meat, milk, wool, transport, trade goods. A wealthy family owns hundreds of animals, a poor family dozens. The animals are wealth, but also burden. They must be protected, moved, fed, managed constantly. You don't own livestock so much as enter into relationship with them. Your survival depending on theirs and theirs on your competent management. Predators are constant threat, wolves primarily, but also snow leopards at higher elevations, bears in the forested areas. Herders lose animals regularly, not from carelessness, but because predators are skilled and hungry, and no protection is perfect. The attitude toward predators is complex. They're threats to livelihood, but also respected as fellow survivors in harsh environment. Doing what they must as humans do what they must. Killing them is sometimes necessary, but never casual. Climate change affects nomadic life more than settled life. Killing them is sometimes necessary, but never casual. Climate change affects nomadic life more than settled life. The entire system depends on predictable, seasonal patterns. When spring comes late, low elevation pastures green up late, delaying first migration. When autumn snow arrives early, high pastures become inaccessible before animals have descended. When winter is warmer, ice layers form over grass, starving animals. The accumulated knowledge of where to go when becomes unreliable, and people lose animals, lose wealth, lose the buffer that allows them to continue nomadic life. The younger generation faces choice: maintain tradition that's increasingly difficult, economically marginal, physically demanding, or settle and access education, healthcare, economic opportunities. Most choose settlement, not because they reject nomadic culture, but because they want their children to have options. To not be trapped in lifestyle that's becoming untenable. The choice is pragmatic, understandable, and catastrophic for cultural continuity. The Altai mountains are not wilderness. They have never been empty. For thousands of years, they have been homeland, mapped not with ink or stone markers, but with memory, movement, and repeated return. People here learned the land the way one learns a living being. By watching it closely, respecting its limits, and adapting to its moods. Valleys were known for when the grass emerged, ridgelines for how they broke the wind, slopes for where snow lingered longest. Knowledge was not stored in books or archives, but carried in habits, songs, routes, and decisions made every season. Civilization here did not rise upward into monuments. It spread outward across distance and time. That system endured because it worked. It demanded restraint, patience, and acceptance of uncertainty. It asked people to move rather than conquer, to adjust rather than dominate. But it offered something in return, a life shaped by direct relationship with the land. A sense of belonging that did not rely on ownership or permanence. Today, that system is dissolving, not through force, not through armies or erased histories, but through quieter pressures. Market economies that reward stillness, education systems that require permanence, borders that restrict movement, and a climate that no longer behaves as it once did. Settled life promises stability, medical care, wages, and predictability. Against those forces, tradition struggles to justify itself. The nomads who remain understand this better than anyone. There is no romantic illusion left. They know their lives are watched now, studied, photographed, documented as something vanishing. They know the skills they practice: reading weather by cloud shape, managing herds without overgrazing, navigating without roads, are no longer necessary in a digital urban world. They continue anyway, not out of stubbornness, but out of commitment. Out of responsibility to ancestors who lived this way and to landscapes shaped by their presence. Many know their children will choose differently, and they do not blame them. Survival today demands education, income, connection to larger systems. Still, they hold the line for as long as they can, knowing that once broken, it cannot be restored. What disappears with them is not just a lifestyle, but a way of thinking. A worldview that placed humans inside nature rather than above it. A system that valued continuity over growth, balance over expansion, memory over novelty. When nomadic life ends, it does not end cleanly. It fragments, repackaged as tourism, cultural performances, heritage projects. Yurts become attractions. Herding becomes demonstration. Migration becomes story rather than necessity. What once sustained life becomes something observed from the outside. The mountains, however, remain unmoved by this transition. The Altai has seen empires rise and dissolve, trade routes open and close. Religions arrive and fade. Glaciers advance and retreat. Forests shift. Rivers change course. It does not mourn. It does not record loss. It continues according to forces far older and larger than human memory. Snow still falls where it always has. Wind still scours the passes. The peaks remain sacred, whether or not anyone remembers why. Yet something irreplaceable is still being lost. The relationship between people and these mountains, formed through dependence rather than admiration, is fading. Future visitors will stand in these valleys and feel awe, but not familiarity. They will see beauty, not obligation. They will pass through rather than belong. The Altai will become something to visit, not something that requires participation, discipline, and endurance. A destination, not a living system shared with those who know its dangers and its generosity equally well. This is the Altai now. An ancient crossroads growing quiet. A homeland slowly emptying. A place transitioning from lived space to photographed space. The cold persists, the storms persist. The silence deepens. What vanishes is the accumulated human understanding of how to exist here without reshaping it entirely. How to move lightly, take little, and remain the part of a cycle rather than its end point. The last nomads of the frozen mountains continued their seasonal movements, following paths older than written history, guided by instincts refined over centuries. Each migration, each winter survived, each herd maintained, carries the weight of an ending. When these rhythms finally stop, the land will not collapse, the mountains will not fall. But a long conversation between humans and landscape, one carried on through footsteps, camps, and quiet adaptation, will end. The mountains may not notice. They do not require witnesses. They existed before humans arrived and will persist long after they are gone. But humans, it seems, require places like the Altai. They remind us that there were ways of living built on humility rather than control, endurance rather than acceleration, belonging rather than ownership.